Okay, so since I have a deadline tomorrow that I am not gonna fulfill, we're just gonna do something a little off the cuff. Anyways, you know what? While we're at it, might as well just play along with some Borderlands. It just so happens that I'm collecting game footage for an upcoming project in the future, Borderlands related as well. Anyways, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna talk about the Borderlands movie. Obviously. So if y'all can't tell, well, I don't know how y'all would have been able to tell from 2 videos, but Borderlands has it's near and dear to me. It's one of my favorite game franchises. I literally have a Vault tattoo on my wrist. So historically, video game adaptations haven't been the best. They haven't, right? We all know that, but we all should know that by now. I mean, they seem to be getting better in the past years, or in the past couple of years, but it's not enough to the point where, it's going to give me faith in the Borderlands adaptation. And not to mention, the 2 trailers didn't give me a lot of hope either. Also, why is Bobby Lee in the movie? I am so confused, but whatever. Anyways, so now that the movie's out, so going in, I was totally expecting to just hate the movie, because I mean, well, one, everybody seems to hate it, but at the same time, people do have the tendency to over-exaggerate things, or just they find ways to complain sometimes, right? But at the same time, the movie really generally didn't look promising from the trailers or anything like that. Not to mention, there's a lot of news headline coming out recently talking about the troubled production of the movie as well, which doesn't look good at all. I think one of the designers of the claptrap suit or whatever, spent 5 months on it and didn't even get credit for it. There's more. I read an article about how the stunt doubles were shooting scenes for an R-rated movie, which didn't go through, obviously. So I mean, it's just troubled production all around. Plus, not to mention, if you don't know, I think this movie was announced all the way back in 2014 or some shit like. Yeah, it's just not a good look overall. Also, I just realized it's how perfectly convenient I'm playing Lilith right now, as she was the main character. She was indiscriminately the most important character in the movie, no doubt about it. All right, so I came in with an open mind, right? That this is going to be very different from the games, and I'm probably just going to have to accept that, right? Because the thing about me is I'm not a purist for the most part, especially in comic books, right? I don't need perfect one-to-one adaptations. If you want to take creative liberty to make some changes about a certain character, right? I'm okay with change as long as it works in the context of its story that it is telling, right? For example, I had a conversation about 2017 Logan with a friend of mine, right? She explains how she doesn't like it just because, this isn't the Logan she knows. He's not angry and broody, right? But he's more like a sarcastic, he has a lot of sarcastic, dry humor, and that's not the Logan that she gets to see. However, my argument to that is, it makes sense in the context of the story. Let's say hypothetically, throughout the franchise, he was exactly what she wants him to be, right? In the context of the story of Logan, he is just so old and out of it by then. It makes sense that he would eventually become very broody. So, I mean, it makes sense in the context of the story of Logan. And speaking of the context of the story, it just works with the character arc that he was given as well. It makes perfect sense. Like I said, if you're going to change the source material, at least make it work within the context of the story. Also, another good example, The Boys is literally, I think that thing is the furthest thing from faithful as it could be, right? And it's literally for the better. Now, to the movie itself, right? So yeah, in an adaptation standpoint, this gets literally a 1 out of 10. It changes so much from the original source material. A lot of the characters don't feel like themselves per se. Certain characters, Lilith, for example, right? I guess spoilers matters, I guess. But as I was saying, the general cadence and demeanor is there, but the attitude isn't the same. Oh, that's annoying. The attitude isn't the same, right? She's kind of a hard ass in this movie, and I mean, this is clearly a much older Lilith. So I guess it works in that sense, but I don't think that's exactly what I want to see. So I'd rather see a much younger actor portraying as Lilith. Don't get me wrong, Kate Blanchett does the job. And it's only because she's just a seasoned actress in general. So naturally, she's gonna bring it out. And her version of Lilith works in that sense. But it's still not necessarily what I want to see, right? So in terms of a faithful adaptation standpoint, that's where it doesn't work. And that's just Lilith alone, right? All the other characters don't exactly work. Is it Adriana or Ariana? I think it's Ariana. Ariana Greenblatt as Tiny Tina. I mean, the actual dialogue this sounds like something Tiny Tina would say, but like the actual delivery and cadence isn't there compared to Lilith. But even then, like I said, even with Lilith, like I said, the cadence is there, but like the attitude isn't. Kevin Hart, I mean, like I said, same thing. The things he says does sound like Roland, just not the delivery doesn't sound like Roland. I think the only faithful character, only person that was really a faithful character was Florian Montanu's Creed. Not Creed. No, he was in the movie Creed, but his name wasn't Creed. Krieg. But at the same time, something tells me it's the original voice actor Krieg that did the voice. And then Florian Montianu just provided the body. That's what I feel like it is. Who else is there? Tannis. I mean, same thing. Like, yeah, the things that she's saying does sound like Tannis, but like the cadence and the attitude and the cadence, the attitude, and the delivery just wasn't there. It doesn't match the character, or even resembles the character, really. And in terms of the lore, they just completely butchered the lore as well. I mean, don't get me wrong. The lore of Borderlands isn't that great to begin with anyways, so like it doesn't really matter. Well, it doesn't matter too much, but at the same time, you know. Let's take The Boys, for example, right? The story is just absolutely sloppy in the original comic book, right? Or that's what I'm assuming, because I hear people don't really like the comic very much compared to the show. Making a live adaptation, it gives you the opportunity to, you know, tighten up certain parts of the lore. Like, you could omit some parts of it, but you could, like, you know, change it in the sense that you could at least tighten it up or make it make sense, right? Especially if or the original source material barely functions as is. So yeah, the amount of things that just broken. Like, the character backstories are completely different. And like, even when I go back to the argument of, you know, oh, does it work in the context of the story? Yeah, it does, but at the same time, it doesn't make it interesting per se. It doesn't add much either. So like, it literally doesn't do anything. In the context of this movie, it doesn't really do much either. It doesn't add much, doesn't really do anything. It's not a worthwhile change. So it's kind of pointless. It feels very pointless and contrived. So like, in the perspective of a faithful adaptation, no, if that's what you're going into the movie hoping for and expecting, which is a valid expectation to have, it's not gonna make you happy. It's arguably worse than the Halo show, if I'm being honest, like in terms of how faithful it is to the original source material. And that's kind of crazy to say, because like the Halo show is also drastically different from the source material as well, and I don't know, the way this movie handles it doesn't work. Like I said, that whole explanation I just went on is in the perspective of a Borderlands fan. Like, if you want a faithful adaptation, right? In terms of how well does it adapt the original source material? That's what this whole explanation was. Now, in terms of a filmmaking perspective, right? Like, let's say you're just looking at it as just a film, and you completely disconnect it from the original source material. It's really not that bad in comparison to what people are saying. I feel like most of the outrage is how unfaithful it is. I haven't really looked at what people have been saying, but like that's what I'm assuming it would be. But however, like I said, back to in the perspective of just a film, right? How does it hold up in a perspective in the just a filmmaking media perspective, I guess you can say that. Yeah, it really does just feel like a run-of-the-mill, it really feels like a run-of-the-mill adventure movie. Like, it doesn't really work. But at the same time, I don't think it's terrible, because I've seen movies that are just way worse. Maybe I think I should have prefaced this a little sooner, but Shazam! Fury of the Gods, probably one of the worst movies I've seen in general. In the past, and especially in recent memory, for sure. Like, that's my gold standard, right? Like, every time people talk about, this movie is really fucking bad, like Madam Web. I think that's another movie that people are really talking about how bad it was. And, you know, I went to that movie expecting, okay, is it going to be as bad or worse than Shazam 2? Honestly, I'm going to have to say no. I'm going to have to say no on that one. So kind of the same case here, right? Everywhere on the web, it's saying this is a really bad movie. I went in expecting it to be worse than Shazam 2, or just as bad. And I gotta say, it's not that bad. Not to mention, in terms of adaptations, right, or video game adaptations to movies, I still think Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City is still significantly worse than what this was. Now, to really fully dive into like, you know, the filmmaking perspective of things. Yeah, it's run of the mill, but it's still, you know, very flawed in a lot of ways. So to start, where do I begin? Oh man. I guess the writing. Man, let's start with the writing, right? Actually, no. The writing, it's not the plot writing isn't the worst thing in the world, but it definitely has noticeably terrible pacing issues. So once again, spoilers. I don't know if my two audience that are watching this. I don't think my two viewers that are watching this is going to care about spoilers. So here goes. But the pacing is just really bad. I think it's more especially noticeable in the relationship between Tiny Tina and Lilith, you know. Clearly, they tried to make a bond between the two characters, and it just doesn't work. They don't give it enough time to really flesh it out. Whoops. Anyways, no, yeah, they don't spend enough time to really flesh out the relationship between Tiny Tina and Lilith. So at times they're gonna like force in a dramatic scene between the two to, you know, show, oh, Lilith is actually sympathizing with Tiny Tina and whatever, and they're finally, you know, building a bond. But you don't feel it because like they don't really do much together. They literally just met, and then all of a sudden you're seeing Lilith feeling sympathy for her, and I'm just like, you know, this feels very rushed. They didn't give it enough time to flesh it out, and then of course it kind of carries on throughout the rest of the movie as well, right? Like there's more supposedly tender moments with Lilith and Tiny Tina, and none of them feel organic or earned in any way possible. Plus, like, they kind of just breeze through it too. So, like, once again, the pacing is just not there. It's pretty bad. Plus, the stakes in the agency in the movie just feels very, very lackluster. It's not there for the most part. And the reason is the way a lot of these conflicts throughout the movie just literally resolves themselves. Like, it's no stakes, no urgencies. It kind of just resolves itself, and then they just move on to the next issue. So like, it's just a lot of forced conflict and forced drama throughout the film, and none of it works. Literally nothing works in that. Nothing about it works, right? So any sense of stakes and urgency in the movie basically non-existent. So like, it's hard to really invest into, you know, what happens to the characters in each scene. A lot of forced drama to, you know, create character chemistry also really falls flat because, you know, they just breeze through it. You know, they don't take time to really build it up. And I think it's a good time to talk about, you know, the technical, I guess you could say, the technical production of the movie. I'm not the type of person to really complain about CGI and green screen, right? But it's just, the green screen is so noticeable in this movie. Like, sometimes there's certain shots you can just really tell, oh, this was definitely shot in the green screen. I know most movies in general are shot in the green screen, but sometimes certain movies does a better job of hiding it, you know. This movie does not. And I guess the best way to explain it is, you know, I'm gonna use some photography terms here, but like the subject compression from the background makes it very clear. I guess the best way to explain it is, you could the way the subject is shot, you could tell they're popping out from the background, and it just looks bad. And just a lot of and why is this guy not critting? Hello? What if I just do this? Boop. That did no damage. Anyways, yeah, as I was saying, so a lot of the times, the way it's shot, the way it's cut and edited, just isn't very good either. It's very sloppy. It's a lot of fast cuts to hide a lot of the imperfections. And let me tell you, it is very poorly shot through and through. And not to mention, it's also the choreography is also just really not there either. The choreography is bad. The cinematography in each action sequence is also really bad. And the editing was also just really jarring to look at. There's a lot of times throughout the movie where my eye just felt kind of strained. Speaking of which, and continuing on with, you know, technical performance or technical presentation, I do not like the sound mixing in this movie. It's noticeably bad. Especially a lot of the higher pitch was just very poorly mixed. It actually hurt my ears a little bit. I mean, this might be a little anecdotal. This might just be a me thing, but you know, I've heard plenty of loud gunshots in the theater before, but it doesn't mean they're bad per se. You know, I've heard loud gunshots in the theaters, and they still sound really well mixed together, right? They don't sound blown out. Immediately, the most recent example that comes to mind is Civil War, but is A24's Civil War, especially that last scene, you know, when they're just clearing out the White House. You know, the sound mixing for the gunshots sounded incredible. Just very immersive. It made the final scene feel very tense. In Borderlands, I don't know, man. It sounds extremely extremely sloppy. Very weirdly, it sounds very blown out. It doesn't sound crisp. It sounds very distorted, but also weirdly sharp at the same time. And just a lot of the gun sounds in general in this movie just was very awfully mixed. Yeah, you kind of just gotta watch it for yourself. Oh, and it's, back to the choreography again. Some of the Kate Blanchett's choreography noticeably is Kate Blanchett's the choreography when she was shooting her guns does not look right. So a lot of times you will see her bucking her gun up, right, to mimic the recoil of a gun, but the sound effect doesn't match it. Like, she kind of has like a really aggressive way she handles the recoil, but like, you know, the sound effect just doesn't mimic the aggressive motion that she is recoiling her gun, or the aggressive motion of the gun's recoil. There's also a weird whipping sound every time she flips her gun that also just sounded very out of place as well. It just felt like, it literally sounds like it was just overlaid in a separate audio track. I mean, I'm pretty sure it is just overlaid, but it's not mixed in properly. And I think noticeably the last act in the movie was where things really got sloppy. It's really when all the flaws of the movie came together to work together. Everything comes together in the wrong way. That's really what it was. Like, most of these issues I would notice throughout the movie, right? It's never at once, but like the final act really brings them all together. It felt, the pacing was terrible. The pacing was god awful, and the on-screen contrivances was like through the fucking roof in that scene. It was very terrible. It was very rushed, very contrived, a very strong on-screen contrivance. Ooh, that's satisfying. And most important, and lastly, you know, the relationship between Tiny Tina and Lilith, that they're trying to reinforce, that they're, you know, building a strong bond. It didn't feel, it felt out of place. It doesn't feel believable. It felt extremely undercooked. Now, with everything I'm saying about this movie, it really does sound like I'm saying this is the worst movie I've ever seen. And, you know, that's fair. It's fair if you interpret it that way, right? But like I've said, I think I've just seen so many movies to the point I feel really desensitized when something doesn't sound right or even look right. I think I'm just so desensitized by Shazam to the point where I'm just like, you know, it can be worse. I recognize a lot of movies could be worse. Shazam, this movie doesn't even get too close to Shazam levels of bad, to be honest. I think I should talk about the humor as well. First of all, I did not laugh once throughout the movie, but there's a lot of times when I hear a joke, I'm like, oh, I got it. That works. That makes sense. If it doesn't feel out of place or it doesn't feel forced, and I hate to say it, it's not Deadpool. It's not Deadpool. Better yet, it's not Shazam. It's not like Shazam too, you know, where it keeps drawing attention to the joke when someone makes a joke. Like, I do think to some degree humor is subjective. I don't care what people say. To some degree, I don't care what people say. It's only subjective to a certain degree, but I do think there's a certain rubric or methodology behind most jokes to make jokes land more consistently. What I think it is, you know, a lot of jokes should just be in passing dialogue, right? They should just come out organically, and it just happens to be funny. Like, I don't want the fucking camera looking at the character. I don't want you to bring attention to the joke you're trying to make, right? Just say it in passing, and if it's funny naturally, right? And, you know, obviously Claptrap carries the humor in this movie, right? That's kind of his he's obviously the comedy relief. And don't get me wrong, there's still like a scene or two in the movie, literally two scenes, exactly two scenes where they're just drawing attention to the fact, oh, this is just one big gag, right? And yes, those scenes, it did not work in those scenes, but there are other times where, you know, a lot of the humor was just in passing dialogue when he talks to Lilith, and it's, you know, it's acceptable. It's acceptable. I'll accept it. I still didn't laugh per se, but I still think it's handled way better than the way Shazam handled it. Like, literally, it just zooms in on the fucking character saying a joke. Like, certain dialogue is literally just one big gag, a forced gag while you're at it. So even though I didn't really laugh throughout the movie. I don't think I laughed one bit throughout the entire movie, like, at all. I didn't feel like I was cringing. Oh, I think a good example is fucking Joyride. Yeah, Joyride kind of handled it poorly too. Like, you know, every time someone's making a joke, they really bring the attention. They really draw your attention to it, and that's just not a way to do it, you know. And really, Joyride, all it really did was just scream at the camera while saying inappropriate things like, oh, wow, humor. Literally no punchline. So for the most part, I think I talked about just about everything I wanted to really talk about. So to recap, right, like, as an adaptation, yeah, this is awful. It's an awful adaptation. Like, the amount of creative changes they did doesn't really serve much purpose other than, to tell its own story. But yet, even then, its own story was just very, very flawed. Like, it's just a lot of forced drama and forced conflict. Everything felt kind of contrived a little bit to a certain degree. But yeah, no, this movie completely breaks. Not only does it break the lore, but like, none of the characters really resemble themselves. The movie doesn't capture the spirit of the characters, probably the better way to say it. I mean, like I said, some characters had that demeanor and cadence, but they don't have it in the delivery and attitude of the character. Now, how it is as a movie in terms of like a filmmaker's perspective, yeah, I mean, I still think Shazam's way worse. I don't know, man. I just don't care. However, I still think, as a video game adaptation, I still think I've seen worse. Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City, significantly worse in every conceivable way. Like, you can make an argument, yeah, this movie was kind of assassinated the characters from the source material, but like, oh my god, it's just done with so much worse than Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. Like, it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. That alongside Shazam 2. And then as a movie, well, yeah, definitely a very flawed run-of-the-mill. Like, is it one of the worst movies I've seen all year? Arguably, yeah, it's definitely down there. Honestly, so at the time of this recording, my 3 worst movies so far is definitely Madam Web, but I also think Madam Web's a little overhated, or in a sense that, it's not as bad as Shazam 2 was. And honestly, The Beekeeper is also pretty up there, or down there per se. And then, yeah, this movie makes the list as being down there. Now, do I really think it's that bad? Like I said, what the fuck? What? Huh? It's stuck. The car's stuck. It's stuck. What the hell? Like, and it's like I said, in the perspective of a video game adaptation, yeah, it's pretty awful. It's just not as bad as, Welcome to Raccoon City was. One of the worst movies ever made? Definitely not. It's not. So much better. Honestly, y'all seen Ip Man 4? I think Ip Man 4 is way worse. I hate to say it, I think it's way worse. And Shazam 2? Yeah, Shazam 2 is definitely way worse than whatever this was. Now, it might not be as bad as, a lot of people might be saying it is, as a movie anyways. And most of the time, I always recommend, hey, you should always go out, experience something for yourself, and then have an opinion. I don't think this is a movie I'm going to tell people to go out of their way and watch for themselves, right? Sometimes you don't need an opinion. You don't need an opinion on everything. Honestly, you really can't just skip this movie. That's about it, really. I have a Deadpool video in the works right now. I also have a Doom video in the works right now, and I also have another Borderlands video in the works right now. So that's really about it, really. So okay, bye, nerds.